Thursday, July the 21st, First Planning Commission special meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Amanda Denmark.
Here.
Vice Chair Charlie Whitmore.
Here.
Commissioner Kathleen Duncan.
Present.
Commissioner Lydia DePaul.
Here.
Commissioner Rich Delcor. Commissioner Jason Stewart. Commissioner Jim Flynn.
Thank you. Notice regarding adjournment, the Planning Commission will not hear new items after 9:30 unless authorized by majority vote of the commission members present. Items which have not been heard before 9:30 may be continued to the next regular meeting or a special meeting date as determined by the commission members. Notice regarding public comment. Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman, and in speaking, avoid disrespect to commission, staff, and other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. May I have an adoption of the agenda, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Do we have public comments that are for items not on the agenda?
We do not.
Okay. No old business, no new business, so let's jump into our discussion with Kyle.
Hey everyone, welcome to Workshop 2. We look for the deja vu here as we move through this, but again, I want to thank you all for this time as we work to refine and revise our draft of Blueprint Bluffton. Quickly, for those that may be tuning in, my name is Kyle May. I'm a senior associate with MKSK, working with the town here to develop this important document, the comprehensive plan. We have developed a draft, and part of the purpose of our meetings here over this 5-meeting series is to go into thoughts, comments, revisions, ideas for that draft to develop and move closer to an adoptable document for you all to lead you forward in the next 10 years. Quickly, I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share like I did last evening, and we'll continue to do. Just want to make sure everyone can see my screen. Eventually, there we go. So as I mentioned, this is meeting 2 of our 5-meeting series. Tonight's topics are going to focus on transportation, mobility, and community facilities. So same agenda, team as yesterday, same purpose. Really just want to open up these chapters, reflect on the comments that I've received from you, from stakeholders, and from the public on the draft, and talk a little bit about here in detail, our plan to address ideas, concerns that may have arisen, and take this to another version. So, as I mentioned, transportation and community facilities are our 2 topics for this evening. Just a quick reflection on last night, and again, a thank you to the members of the public that offered some comments on our first 2 topics, people and cultural resources. Team commissioners followed up with Charlotte today with notes from that call. I will do the same after our call here this evening. And in advance of our final 3 sessions, because we have a little time between now and our next one, I'd like to package each of those summary documents up for your review the middle of next week. So in terms of the substantial, subjective, and simple edit schedule, we'll get that to you in advance of our next workshop. And in terms of our next steps, we have, and Charlotte will loudly interrupt me here if I'm wrong, but August 2nd, 4th, and 10th, our next workshop, land use and housing, particularly important here within the context of our comprehensive plan. So really excited to have that discussion with you all. As you know, all these topics are somewhat interrelated, but those 2 in particular have a strong relationship. We'll finish with a 4th and 10th, natural resources and resiliency, and our final meeting on the 10th will be economics and the priority investments chapter. Before we get started into tonight's topics, are there any quick comments or things you wish you would have told me last night that we can address?
Anyone from up here? Anyone in the public? I think we're good.
Okay. Great direction, I think, from the group, and I do really appreciate that. And hoping to achieve the same tonight. I'd like to start, if it's okay, with the transportation section. As you remember from last evening, just wanted to give a quick window into what we've heard in terms of volume of comments from you all. And just as a reminder, these are comments that we've received through staff more recently or through the Planning Commission. So we've also received additional comments from staff that have been addressed in several rounds of edits, but within this particular round, we have 31 comments, or 12%, of the overall. As we think about, remember, we've got the substantial, subjective, and simple. And again, with your permission, I'd like to start with the bigger items and then work our way to what we view, and just in terms of the revision, not necessarily the scale of the suggestion, what are more straightforward or clear direction edits. The transportation section is particularly interesting, I think, to us, just in that it's, this is really broadened as a topic in the field from being a simple kind of volume analysis of the vehicular network to really be more of a statement about mobility writ large in your community and indeed in the region. This is an interesting topic additionally because of the fact that a lot of what we deal with within our transportation section are challenges or opportunities that are regional in nature, especially when we think about things to do with congestion, with commuting. As you know, you've got a significant inflow, outflow each day with your workforce and residents. All those things are play into the conclusions, and then eventually, an action set that will be drawn from this. Another piece that's important to lift up here before we jump into the conversation, I think, within this topic in particular, is just like a lot of the topics in this chapter, in our plan overall, varying levels of control in certain infrastructure or certain systems, I should say. And mobility is one of those where we've got a lot of layers, a lot of actors that are participating in your system. When it comes to vehicular network, very few roads, within the town are actually owned and controlled and maintained, by the town, as you all well know. Now, that doesn't mean to say, however, that there aren't key actions and pieces of analysis that are critical to understanding your, qualities of place and qualities of life as well. So with that as a quick primer, here are some of the things that I've pulled out from your comments within this chapter in particular. One item that popped up quite a bit is the need for us to expand, and I see this now quite clearly, references in here the multimodal transportation options in the town. And I think you all know probably that term quite well, commissioners, but for those of you that might be tuning in, multimodal refers to just those ways of getting around that are non-vehicular, right? We think about the transit network, we think about active transportation, biking, walking. There's certainly an opportunity within the document as I read through it with fresh eyes to bolster, I think, our description currently of the system, and also review within the context of the action agenda. Are there other specific policies or even projects that might be lifted there? Additionally, a really unique item for you, maybe not in your region, but in terms of planning nationwide, is the impact and importance of the tourist shrink swell season. And as someone aptly wrote in the draft, that season's shoulders are getting wider and wider. And the times when that's affecting you is also changing and has changed significantly through COVID. I think there's an opportunity in the draft to hit that a lot more directly. Similarly to kind of the discussion we had yesterday with people when we talked about who are these folks that are moving here. This is a unique element, I think, within your storytelling, and one that we need to improve the way we, one, we inventory, and two, we talk about in terms of our agenda. With item C, the importance of the parkway, I think what we wanted to get at there is this is a pretty critical project when we think about what's going on in your community, both in terms of getting around, also in terms of land use, in terms of character maintenance. There's a lot of overlap between this particular investment and other initiatives that are out there in the town. I think we can do a better job. I know we can do a better job of telling that story. In connecting it, again, sort of similar to yesterday, we talked about demographics and its connections, connecting this to other initiatives that are out in our other chapters. And lastly, and I'll pause after this, of course, emphasize the importance. This was a really important point that someone brought up, and I apologize, I don't have the specific commissioner, but the cross-cutting of multi-use paths. So within a system like yours, how it's been built out over eras, where you've got planned developments that kind of meet planned developments. You guys who have ridden a bike or have walked around the community, there's certain streets you like to do that on, there's certain areas where you don't. There's a real power to the cross-cutting path, meaning that goes between some of the developments that have been completed over time. We think about that in terms of commercial development and also in terms of major subdivision or residential development. Whoever made that point, it's a critical one, and one that I want to address, not just within, I think, the inventory and mapping, but also perhaps within some specific actions later in the agenda. So that's a lot for me. Let me pause there and get some reactions, thoughts, additional ideas you have within this chapter.
Oh, I got you.
Okay, well, go ahead and start. Charlie's going to start.
Okay, in reading through the chapter and your notes, and I know you're already talking about it needs to be expanded, I think we, among other things, we need to mention Palmetto Breeze by name and be working with them. Pathways, I do like how it's in there. That is a high priority, has been for decades. I think we need to address safe intersections with more foot and bicycle traffic. The more interesting it gets at places like the traffic circle on 46 and 170, out in front of Hampton Lake, some of the other ones in town. We need to explore some of the more like the flashing crossing walks and so on. I think that should be in this plan that we relate to that. Kyle, I may have missed it, but I didn't see any mention of the linear trail that comes through New Riverside.
It's
And
in
that's
there.
a big recreational and transportation.
It's mentioned.
Is it? I didn't see the linear trail. I saw, okay.
You're talking about the East Coast Trail? East Coast? It's in there one time.
I saw Greenbelts or Greenway or whatever. Yeah, okay. But it's, oh, I missed that one, yeah.
I would
I-
like some, on that though, there was clarification because it runs that north-south corridor and our connection to it is weak, I think. Like we have a singular point and it's more, ours runs east-west rather than north-south. So the way it's described is as if it was going to come into our community. And I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. And it's, yeah, we have the one parking lot and access on 46 and that's it. So it's not like you can go park a car at one end and walk to it, type of thing. So addressing, we'll pass over it on 46 and see a couple walking down it or a few people doing it. So it's getting used. I think one of our goals needs to be seeing how it can get used more, how we can improve it. I saw the commuters to Hilton Head mentioned. In that vein, we have a significant number of Bluftonians that commute to Savannah. My wife's a perfect example. She lives in Gulfstream, or lives, yes, she kind of does. She works at Gulfstream, and so do a number of people in our community and the communities around, and they're using that commuter route of 46, which brings up something that I think should be a major, something that's addressed in transportation is we need to work with Jasper County, Hardeeville, to get the thoroughfares going through their area that can handle not just us, but them. Bluffton Parkway, as an example, Bluffton Parkway is supposed to become exit 3 on I-95. 46 is going to need, if not widening, some traffic measures on it as these developments are getting approved next to us. And I think it needs to be a priority. We talk about working in LETs and how we don't own most of the roads, and we need to work with other entities. I think we need to be specific in the entities we're working with and the goals we're trying to accomplish. Related to that, I noticed a couple of times where it said there are two major east-west roads, 278 and 46. You need to add Bluffton Parkway to that, because there truly are three, and that one needs to pop all the way through. That's pretty much all I had for right now. I don't know if that was enough for you, Kyle.
No, yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. I'm taking notes as we go here. I know Charlotte is as well. I think your point about Jasper County and Hardyville are well received. I think one of the challenges in this as we think about some of the roadways, particularly those that you don't control. You have influence. We want to find the right language. I think in terms of how who are the right partners that we want to be working with on that. And I think you're right to point out Jasper and Hardyville. We need to do a better job of highlighting that in the draft.
Well, and
Any other comments?
I was just going to
I'm
say,
sorry, go
we
ahead.
talk in other elements about, the study area and survey area, and we bring it outside the town. We need to look at these other elements like transportation outside the town too. That's all.
Connectivity, yeah.
Right.
Ready? Did you have anything to add? Kathleen, anything?
Yes, I have comments. One of the things, and I'm not sure, when you talk about multimodal transportation, I want to make sure that you're thinking of golf carts as well, as that's a substantial portion of not just even what's happening in Old Town, but even these communities on Buckwalter on 170, they're connecting to our bikeways. One of the things that I'm very concerned, we have a significant population, I think, of interest or use for recreational use for bike paths for cyclists, like real legit cyclists, not just kids running around on their bikes, which I think could be
Lycra.
yeah, real bike lanes. And we don't have well-connected ones, and then there's, obviously issues with people, how well people share the road. And so I get particularly concerned with safety associated with that group. And so I don't see that really addressed well in here, because that's a different entity than these multimodal pathways. And then I'd love to see, and these were kind of in, a lot of these comments were in that email I sent subsequent, but and obviously I had a very detailed transportation comments within the document itself, and I don't want to go line by line on those. But I do want to talk about bus routes, not just a mention of the Palmetto Breeze, which I know was in there, and I appreciated, by the way, that the picture of the Palmetto Breeze was next to the dialogue about the Palmetto Breeze, because it makes it easier to find. But I would also like to see where those bus routes are, where those transportation routes go, and where the gap, and see a gap analysis on that. Or if that's, kind of leading to how Lydia or Commissioner DePaul mentioned yesterday, even if it becomes a task or an action item to actually start looking at doing that gap analysis as we move forward as one of our action items.
Commissioner, can I really quickly, I don't mean to interrupt, but on
No,
that
you go ahead.
point, 'cause I really appreciated that comment you left in the draft, and I actually have some specific ideas about how we might do some of that analysis and what that would lead to. So you talk about the gap analysis, I think that's critically important, especially with that transit piece. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. The Thoroughfare Map, I just think it needs a little more clarification with the communities and what those connectors are. One of the things that I didn't see in this chapter was, the 278's looking at being completely redone between us and Hilton Head, and you're talking 25% of our population is going to Hilton Head, and there's really no discussion about the impact that it has on where we live here. For those 25% of the people, that means something to them.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see more expounded on that. The access management plan we've talked, which talks about interconnected roadways. It talks about where the lights are going. I didn't see that referenced. And I already know that some of our old access management plan is out of date. So that needs to obviously be updated with some of the things that are currently being done or have been done that have affected the plan. So
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the Buckwalter Bluffton Access Management Plan. That should be a part of this.
yeah. The multimodal pathways, and I think this is kind of where Charlie was talking about safe crosswalks, and perhaps some recommendations as part of what that should be, and even maybe levels of what those could look like, because I think safe crosswalks across 46 at Calhoun Street to the promenade is a different kind of connection than is needed off of, going across 278, which is than would be needed for school traffic. And so starting to talk about the types of crosswalks that need to happen in each of those locations, identifying or categorizing them in some capacity would be helpful. I think that's what I have to start with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The crosswalks piece too, Commissioner, I think there's some really good best practices even from around your region that we could include, especially some character imagery there. I'll work with Charlotte to determine, how we address that maybe within the action agenda, what is the right tone for that action. But, there's some good work happening that I think we could relate in there. And you also have some great practices that are, you could be self-referential, I think, in that point too.
Okay, does anyone else have any other comments they want to share? Anyone, public comments regarding anything we've just talked about? Okay, come on up.
Hi, I'm Carol Crutchfield with the Beaufort County School District. Again, thank you for having me. I printed it out. I scanned it for certain keywords like schools and education. So you see I've marked up my book.
Ooh, busy.
So my first comment is actually in the transportation section, and I want to commend you for including in here about the Beaufort County Connects bicycle and pedestrian plan. I actually served on that steering committee. A lot of work went into it, and I'm glad to see that you all have that as a priority on page, I'll put my glasses on, 152. Like that's your first priority. I love that. And I guess my only real comment is, you kind of talk about it, but it didn't make it into the recommendation list, is to prioritize connections to schools. We kind of touched on it last night a little bit about, we have sidewalks right here at Michael C. Riley campus, but they go to nowhere. So we would love to see that connectivity here, and I'm sure there are lots of other places, and I have some maps somewhere that we could talk about if we need specifics, Kyle. But if you can put that would be awesome.
Yes,
at
ma'am.
least to continue to bring that to, the attention of folks who make decisions.
Carol,
Yeah.
we'll give you extra time here on this one because I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
Wait, you can't
When it
do
comes
that.
to the sidewalk connections, have you all taken a step of mapping priority investments, like the priority gaps to be filled? Obviously, our team could do that. I'm just wondering if you all have taken a step like that before.
Have you read the document, the bike and ped
Yes,
report?
yeah.
Okay, so some of that is in that report. And I would say that nothing has been updated recently. I would say what we did with the county was probably 5 years ago, and we looked at some gaps countywide. The ones I was talking about are just the ones I know that come to mind immediately. Yeah.
Oh, that's really helpful. I just wanted to make sure that because obviously we have that plan, that there hasn't been any deviation from that since then. But that's very
No,
helpful.
There has
Thank
not
you.
been. Yeah, okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine, and that's really all I have about this topic.
Well, I
So
have
thank
to
you.
say thank you for bringing that up because that's an area that was near and dear to my heart when my
Oh,
kids were young. And I
absolutely.
totally slipped my mind. And that's why everybody participating, it makes a huge difference. Thank you.
Village, so. All right, thanks.
Okay. Kyle, if you want to continue on.
Great. Commissioners, before we move on to the next subject, I did just want to quickly hit on some of the other points, if it's okay, not go line by line. I'll follow up with this document, but just to go over some of the other things that I pulled out of the comments. Is that okay?
Okay, one second. Ms. Manning has a comment real quick to add on to what we were just talking about.
Transportation. Okay. I guess I had a couple of different viewpoints. One was, I did agree, I didn't see the word golf cart in the whole document. Certainly, a lot of people are using them. And I kind of think their use is probably, I think we will see more of that as far as interconnecting with developments. I'm all for bike paths and for the pedestrians for walking, but when I read this chapter, I'm like, where are we? Is this Bluffton? In our search for a retirement home, we went to Peachtree City, and that's a complete town that they only have golf carts. So you use a golf cart to go to school, a golf cart to go to the grocery store, and that's the way they built that development. In Nashville, we went to a community where they had a planned unit development, and you went in there and they had their own grocery store. You walked to it. You walked to the elementary school. They had a little mini post office. And then if you really want to do something exciting, you could hop in your car and go up to Nashville. I don't see that here, you know? And I hear this word interconnectivity. Is somebody in Belfair really going to come over to Hampton Lake? And then there's a statement in this chapter, the Bluffton state of mind to permeate the roadway corridors across the community, create a unified look and feel that is uniquely Bluffton, and support the non-motorized and alternative transportation modes that are needed. You know, I think there's a mix in here. And certainly the communities around Old Town, we want them to be interconnected and be able to walk among them and bicycle. But I also looked at the map where it showed the trails, and it says something to the effect of it's 35 miles to completely connect the system, require another dozen miles. Well, I looked at the map. There's no more dozen miles. You'd probably have to double or triple the 35 miles. And are we really going to have a bike path on Fording Island Road? I mean,
I actually hope we do.
I would
because-
love that.
Yeah.
from a safety, my other hat is safety. And the safety accidents with pedestrians and with golf carts are sky high. Plus, even with COVID, fatalities on the road, it's hard to believe, went up 20%. There were more fatalities in 2020. So on Fording Island Road, I don't think that's a great idea, but that's just me. The other thing I didn't see in here, there was a talk about water access, and in fact, the recommendation says expand public water transport, and there's no mention of water access for boats. Also, we already mentioned the interconnecting for certainly the schools and having a kid be able to ride his bike. That's wonderful, right? But I also don't see anything for handicap transport. And my mother was in a nursing home for 18 years, and my brother now is the driver for the truck, because that is a valuable service to the family, to be able to take out their loved one to a restaurant or come watch a soccer game. I don't see that mentioned at all. And we do have an older population. Also, with that older population, seniors trying to get shopping, right? As they get older, it gets harder to drive. So it'd be good to have some bus transport. But all of that really needs to be looked at from the plan. And again, I don't see a map in here that says, here's all the developments. Here's where the new development is going to occur. Okay? And I went through the land use. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. Where is the plan? Okay? I want to be able to see it on a sheet of paper that says, Buckwalter is built out to this, and a little house diagram, and said we're going to have this many more residential, this much more commercial. Palmetto Bluff, Riverside, this is the blob that it is now, and this is what's expected. Because that's how you design the transportation network. You look at the needs of the community, and what works in this section of the community may not work in that section of the community. So I'm just sharing with you what I'm used to. The other one was completing the the Bluffton Parkway all the way could reduce the overall pressure on SC 46, potentially allowing it to retain its rural two-lane character that is so valued by the community. Well, again, this whole chapter is filled with very nice statements. You know, feels good. But the truth of the matter is, you're putting how many homes in Riverside? How many homes on Palmetto Bluff? And you're going to keep the rural nature of 46.
We're not widening 46 from the
Well, I'm not,
circle lane.
I'm
I can
just,
tell you that.
I'm just, okay? And then, and somebody from the town, I asked them, what are we going to do when people are at a traffic light for 5 cycles? And they said, well, they'll just move. Well, that shouldn't be the objective. The objective is to plan and do it correctly and plan individually. So I think that was it. No golf carts was a critical thing, and also no the boat access. People do want that public boat access. And I guess I'll just belabor it one more. You know, we've lived in different places. What was so nice is to be able to maybe drive your car and 3.5 mile shaded, 10 feet wide walkway where you could bring your little kids and they could learn to ride a bike. When they got older, if they want to be on a skateboard, you want to walk your dog. It was safe. It was shaded. You could walk the whole 3.5 miles and then walk the whole 3.5 miles back or wherever you want. And we have all these trails and all, nothing along the waterway. I mean, in all the planning that's been done, didn't anyone think that we're surrounded by waterways? Where is even a 1 mile walkway along a river for biking and walking? You want to put it on Fording Island Road? And we have this new development going across the Toyota dealership there where they call it Okatee Park. And I keep trying to find what the map is. It looks kind of pathetic, frankly. You know, putting a tree and a bench is not a park. Anybody can do that. Where is the nice walkway along Okatee River that a mom could take her kids and they could ride a bike and be very safe and not have to worry about crossing anywhere but being safe? So I just think, you know, there's a lot of ideas out there, and especially in Ohio, of all places, where the consultant comes from. They have tremendous park systems. Bring a little bit of that feel to here. Thank you.
I thought you were bad-mouthing Ohio yesterday, Ms. Manning. Thank you.
I will, just real quick, and this is just, I don't know if you know this, but that park you referenced is actually county-controlled and on unincorporated Beaufort County. It's not in Bluffton. So, I mean, we can work with and give them opinions, but.
And I didn't mention this because it is in that chapter, because I read that chapter and I said, I don't know where I am. On the watershed, if you go back to the 2011 report, it says you got to work with partnerships between the county. Okay. The 2020 report says we got to have partnerships with the county. We're meeting in a week and we got priority recommendations, and this thing says we have to work partnerships. You know what I say? I'm a safety person. This is an issue. And until you get at the root cause, you're never going to solve the issue. Okay? So some smart people need to get together and figure out why is it that we can't get these things done? Because otherwise, it's just a Band-Aid every time. So that's my philosophy, my 35 years of safety.
Kyle, on the heels of Ms. Manning's comments, it occurs to me, I wonder if we couldn't include an inventory map that shows some of those water access points. I'm sorry, I'll
Yeah.
speak more directly into the microphone. And maybe even some of those water connection points that are typical, you know, people going to Fusky, people going to Savannah, just kind of give some reference as to what are our typical routes. I know there's a lot of local meanderings around as well. There's a sandbar that's a pretty hot spot, and so it might even show nodes of activity on our waterways as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then the
Definitely do that.
other transportation-related item, it kind of actually straddles the line between that and community facilities is, and I kind of touched upon this yesterday, like I really love the character of Old Town, but I do not want to see parking lots all the way through it, but I also know that you have to be able to get into Old Town. And so one of the things that happens when you're older and less mobile is, and when you don't have a whole lot of parking, is that you can't get to the places that you want to get to. And so one of the things that I'd really like to see encouraged here is potentially something where it's a park and ride, where the town, I know we have the pedicab system that we at least attempted at. I don't know how successful or unsuccessful that is, why it would have been, what was successful or wasn't successful, but taking an analysis of seeing if we can see that through a little better, or continue to push that a little further along so that we can still have this vibrant downtown that's not completely consumed with parking.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great thought.
Well, even Kathleen, like, was it years ago or during festivals, or they have the little trolley? If we had some of that to help now that we've grown so much and there's more activity and more places to go and less places to park.
Yeah.
But we do have a shuttle that goes through Bluffton, right?
So what's the little trolley thing?
Palmetto Breeze has one. I don't know if it's currently running or not.
I don't know that it
But it
is.
ran from Buckwalter all the way down through Old Town up to Tanger and back. And every time I saw it, it was empty. So I don't know if it was an advertising or a...
People probably don't know. I don't know.
But those need to be priorities for us to figure out.
Right.
Agreed.
Right.
And I will say, Kathleen, you brought it up earlier, and it was mentioned here too. I don't know if I'm on the same page as everyone else with golf carts. The golf cart rules in South Carolina are such that I could not take my golf cart out of Hampton Lake and take it down to the Publix, because it has to be, by my memory, it has to be a road that's 35 mile an hour or less speed limit, that's not a numbered road. I don't know that we have viable ways of, outside of Old Town, of getting golf carts around, and riding them on the pathways is, whether we want to let it happen or not, is against state law. So golf cart transportation, I think, has to be within its own modes, unless we come up with some other way.
Well, I think, and again, I think that could be it could be a part of a study, because I think you're right. There are some golf carts that can go 30 miles an hour. My little electric one is not going 30 miles an hour. So my little cart is probably not appropriate on the roadway with those cyclists that are moving. But somebody that can drive 30 miles an hour more closer to the speed of those cyclists, maybe they're sharing the road with and maybe there's signage appropriate. I think that there's an ability to look at that. And I think, like you said, you can't get reasonably to the parkers from Hampton Lake, but perhaps that's why there needs to be a multimodal pathway or a pathway system that addresses those two types of people that are driving, not just the 30 mile an hour golf cart, but also the slow golf cart and the cyclist and the kid on the bicycle.
There's one other use I'd throw into that conversation too, which is electric bikes, which obviously can go faster as well. I think it's part of that discussion.
I don't see those a lot around here, but yeah.
Well, group, if it's okay, I'd like to just show a couple of more edits here, and then if a couple more comments, and then we can move on to our other topic of facilities. Let me share my screen here one more time. In terms of some of the additional notes that I pulled out from your comments and from additional comments from the public and stakeholders, remember we got the section of the idea is subjective. So these are areas where I want to work with Charlotte, with Kevin, with the staff to understand how we have point of view on the particular issue. You bring up the golf cart one. It's actually an interesting one because in the comments, I think your community's split on this issue, maybe the way you all are. in how we, deal with that particular form of mobility. I think you see some of each of your comments reflected there from the broader set. So that may be something that we add into this, and just how, because obviously we can't suggest any, what would be illegal activity, in the plan, but certainly we can think about what the system's, approach could be to facilitating that movement. So definitely want to make sure that we include that. You'll see that I've added the water access points and connections map. That actually shouldn't be there. That should be in the simple category. One piece I think that's important to this particular conversation has to do with the roadway ownership. With less than 1% of these roads being, maintained, owned, by the town, what's the right way to, and I think that the term might be here, I think, educate through the document about that particular issue. Because as we hear, it's not just in your community, we hear this, all over the country when roads come up, the idea of congestion. Well, and then the idea is, well, what can the town do about that? And I think there are several things that the town can do about it, but when it comes to very large capital project investments, that might be outside the outside the purview of the town's budgeting process. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up as a key point, and I think we're going to work with the staff here to determine exactly how to address that. Some other items that came up, one had to do with rideshare, which I think is a really important point. Also, kind of coupled with that is with the work from home, kind of revolution that's going on right now. How does that weigh into some of the statistics that we have? And a lot of the data, unfortunately, is just right before, COVID hit. So as we look to this, I'm going to work hard and see if we can find some data sets that study you, especially when it comes to traffic through the last couple of years, and see if there's been any kind of measurable, notable change, based on that, and if any recovery, good or bad, is occurring. Another, and I think Commissioner Duncan, you brought this up, the for the transit stops, adding some idea of walk shed for those stops, 5 minute, 10-minute, whatever that might be, taking into account the sidewalk a network into that analysis. I think that could be valuable here. So we'll make sure that, I think that's in the subjective category, just because I want to talk with staff about, do the conclusions of that map necessitate some specific action later in this chapter. And there, you'll see quite a few, I think, simple directions in this. Not simple in the sense that they're small, but simple in the sense that you all have provided me some clear direction. I think one key item here, and I'll only point out a couple, has to do with crash data and safety. Important to point out, and back to some of Ms. Manning's comments a little bit earlier, are there hot spots in your community? What can we be thinking about in terms of infrastructure, intersection safety, pedestrian safety, and also just are there flaws within, some of the engineering for some of these roadways? So I think that's something that we want to bolster in this, to the point if there are actions that likely influential in nature, but are there actions that we can take as a community, to address those. The other item, and I think this does get back to one of Ms. Manning's comments about the idea of, the ongoing conversation that's happening regionally around transportation, especially with T4.1, which really is the idea that you continue to collaborate and be, loud partners in that discussion as those projects are debated. I also believe that there's probably some more tactical steps that we could add into that, best practices, I think, from around your region, and how you take the needs of your community and make sure that they are first and foremost on the agenda for regional bodies as they consider future investments. So I want to take another look at that action in particular, and become a little more sharp, I think, on what we can be doing. Not to say you have to do. I don't want to be too prescriptive, I think, especially there, but things that you can be doing to raise the volume. Those are the two that I'd point out here, but before we move on to facilities, are there any other comments, thoughts from you all?
I have one question just before we dive into facilities. Charlie had sent a document from the town that I had a chance to review last night, and it talks about our residential build out being 73%. And we have on page 50 of the plan, it talks about having 44 or 46% of the housing in PUDs built to date. Is that accurate? And can we also include what the total residential build-out for Bluffton is if it really is 73%? Because I think that greatly impacts our conversations about facilities in terms of what we are going to need. If we're already at 73%, that's vastly different than 46. So just clarity on, I guess, what the numbers really are, and then,
And just so you know, Kyle, those numbers came from Kevin Icard,
Yeah.
and it showed 73 residential and 31 commercial,
35, yeah.
35 commercial for a total of 52. So if that 40 number, 50 number is combining commercial and residential, I think we need to further define it. Good catch.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'll talk to Kevin too about the methodology to get to that percentage, but that's just based on raw zoning capacity. Let me dig into that one. I appreciate you bringing that up.
And those numbers are interesting when you start digging into that, when I was looking at that PowerPoint, because it would be like there's a hotel number of rooms that hadn't been built. And so they would take the commercial percentage, or the non-residential percentage, the residential percentage combined and divide by 3, which is kind of a funny number just because one particular use isn't there. So, and even how that is looked at from a residential versus non-residential there was some
Yeah.
classification differences. So I wouldn't say that we're necessarily 52% built out as an accurate number, but it is important to, like Lydia said, take a closer look. And I appreciate, by the way, having that information was huge, just to be looking at residential, even non-residential, and kind of the metrics that were leading to that was wonderful and would be great to have in
Showing
here.
it on a map, too, I think would be super helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that the mobile town hall presentation?
Yes. Matter of fact, if we can get that to Kyle, that'd probably be a good idea.
Yeah.
Say something.
Come on up.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry to be a pain, but
That's what we're here for.
When we were shown that presentation back in February, I'm sorry, I'm an engineer. The numbers didn't make sense. And I kept questioning and questioning and questioning. And finally, the other day, I said, I'm not going to get an answer, so I'm just going to take the spreadsheet. And unfortunately, I didn't have it in Excel, but I went through the numbers. The numbers are not correct, okay? So I did send it to planning, so before you send it out, please make sure you look at it. You can't add percentages, okay? It's apples and oranges. And the residential number's not correct, and then the commercial number's not correct, and then the total's not correct. So before you go out and quote the 52%, it's not right.
Well, what we need to do is the raw data is in there, the spreadsheet
Yeah.
with what's been approved for each one, so we need to look at that.
The
And if-
percents are wrong.
You get
Yeah,
that,
I
Kyle?
think
So go by that
I'll
raw.
grab that. I think the acreages are critical to me. Not all residential's made the same either, right? So you can have 1 acre that leads to 20 new residents, 1 acre that leads to 1, right? So we'll unpack that.
Yeah, and I think particularly because we have a lot of wetlands in this area, so there's uplands and lowlands that are impacting those numbers greatly, and so.
Yeah.
But again, back to Commissioner DePaul, mapping it is
Yeah.
going to be so helpful. And it's mapping capacity, and I understand that's not mapping where actually people will go. It's just mapping where people can go and the types of development that can go there.
Yeah, that's the distinction for sure. Well, why don't we move over into our other subject for this evening? As I mentioned, I'll follow up with the group here on our notes for today, as well as some of these points that I've pulled out, and really want you to grade, my assessment of your comments. So if you think there are major things that are missing that that come up later, tomorrow, or you're having dinner, whatever it might be, feel free to share those as we move forward. Let me go ahead and share my screen here one more time.
Kyle, before you do that.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody who's in the audience actually just emailed me real quick. That Palmetto Breeze route is still running. It's called the Breeze Bluffton or Bluffton Breeze route. And it does run everywhere from North Buckwalter all the way down to Tanger 2.
There needs to be some more signage.
I'm not
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
it
it's
still
there, but
exists.
not a lot of people know about it because I don't know that I see that.
I don't know where the bus stop even is in
Yeah,
Old Town.
where would the stops be? A map would be nice.
Low Country Fresh Market, Buckwalter, well, we can get into it another time.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks.
We'll be sure to include that in that map.
And the lack of communication of the information that's making it to the public is important to note.
Okay. Our second chapter this evening, community facilities, had a couple dozen comments in here from the group. As you remember, as we go through these generally in order here, we think about the comments or feedback here from beginning to the end of the chapter, which remember each chapter ends with our recommendations or action agenda. I think if there's a takeaway here from your analysis, from your comments and from comments that we received from the public and stakeholders, there's a need to seriously bolster this chapter in particular. I think when we think about the inventory, not just of the town-owned services, meaning the things that you do and are responsible for, but also those things that are impacting the quality of life, quality of place, opportunity. We need to be better in this chapter about telling that full story. With item A, I talk specifically here about, again, the town-owned services. This would include the police department, their strategic plan. Within public services, what's going on with the parks, facilities, their master planning work, and short-term and long-term capital improvements, also to do with civic facilities. Obviously, you've got a well-invested in and beautiful municipal campus, but as we looked around some other chapters that are similar to this, some assessment of the infrastructure and what's there today. So my, again, PA stands for planned action, is to incorporate this service analysis with also some special reference to the individual strategic planning that's going on for these departments. So, and it's not to double cover or to question, but it's to lift up each of those items, what they're doing, what they're planning, and how that relates to this broader question about capacity and growth within the community. So again, I would love to couple, I think, that analysis with what we've done in the people section around population projections, locations, part of what we just described, right? Potential build out or capacity assessments. How does that overlay with, police service catchment areas? How does that overlay with current facilities? And I'm just referring here to the town-owned, portion of that question. Another major, I'll concede, blind spot within this, and Ms. Manning has pointed this out, and I'll cover again, is the need to better inventory and connect analysis around service providers to the town. So critical ones within those that are obvious, fire department, school district, Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer, waste management, hospitals and medical, energy providers, internet, Beaufort County Library, and potentially some that I'm missing. And I believe the action there is as stated, but what we need to do within this chapter in its next version for you all is have that complete inventory, also including in this, if there are strategic plan priorities for any of these groups that overlap, I think, with the work that we could be doing or lifting up, I think, within town action, even though the town is not individually responsible for these items, that needs to be critically stated within this. And then lastly, I will point out, and I really do appreciate Carol's comments from yesterday, and I'm glad that, Carol, you're also here today. I think that we've not done a good enough job of talking about the pressures specifically on the school district. Being a county school district, that comes with some unique challenges as you straddle a number of different communities with a number of different kind of points in time stories to tell, right? And I think the language in this could better reflect some of the issues that were brought up yesterday. And this includes, I think, stronger reference, as I mentioned, to the group's strategic plan, but also some specific analysis that we've done within your demographic profile, how that might be changing. I think there's a strong connection here also to the discussion yesterday. We talked about people, about who is coming here, meaning what's the makeup of some of these new residents, what's the implication there for our school facilities. And last but not least within this section, with private schooling, parochial schooling that is available in Bluffton, how does that interrelate, I think, to this particular issue? We have a small write-up on that right now, but I'll concede that needs to expand. So with item C, that is my plan, is to fully integrate that along with the other chapters and where it's relevant. Let me stop there and get some reactions from you all, whether it's this item or it's just chapter in general.
I went first last time.
I would say also on item B, I want to incorporate, I appreciate you've got the Parks and Recreation or Parks and Facilities under A, but I also would like to be looking at from a not town-provided county parks and potentially even looking at, with an analysis, looking at what's privately provided to the communities, because I think there's possibly some gap analysis to be actually pursued in terms of that, because I think some of the communities have amenity areas that check a box, while some have exceptional amenities that well serve the community. So I think that at some point that needs to be analyzed. I don't know that we have to drill down into that fully in this plan, but I think just taking that's part of the picture. And I appreciate that you're looking at private schools, along with, and the load that is assuming in the picture of our Beaufort County School District. I know you're not to the simple yet, but I was just going to say that, in item C, you said expand stormwater analysis and looking at impervious surface and runoff. And I just wanted to also point out, looking at watershed. I was looking at, I think it was the May River Watershed website, and it shows where the May River watershed is, and I was like, look at that, how helpful is that? So just, and noting then also that a good portion of Palmetto Bluff does not drain to the May River watershed, but the parts that are heavily developed currently do. The parts that are projected are actually, by and large, going to the New Riverside. Which is not also, wasn't labeled clearly on the plan I was looking at, but that's because it wasn't draining there. So they weren't worried about it, but I was.
Yeah. Commissioner Duncan, I like that point about the watershed. I wonder, we're going to get to this chapter
Natural
in our
resources.
turn around the carousel here, but with natural resources
Yeah.
and resiliency, there's a number of references in there to watershed, but I think you're right to draw the connection here, especially as we talk about stormwater, impervious surfaces, and the relationship those have to water quality too. So I think those things can live in two places, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's how we approach that here in this chapter.
And I think this, one of the things you're talking about here is with this impervious and runoff, and then I think this was in maybe natural resources. I can't remember for sure, but or maybe it was resilience. They talked about kind of how we address our water, and that having in our stormwater plan, they're wanting more like infiltration basins, and collection points. And so starting to look at, where is our water collecting? All of Old Town, where does that go before we send it into the May River? Or do we just shoot it straight into the May River? So starting to take an analysis of, where are we collecting, where are we infiltrating as a part of that picture? Because I think that is certainly a community facility infrastructure category, which I think is huge, not an insignificant and simple analysis.
And Commissioner, real quickly, I don't mean to say, I think as we lead into this discussion here, that there are no elements of this chapter that you all as a community control. I think you bring up one that's quite critical here. When we think about, the development review process and how we think about stormwater management, as part of a system. We think about green infrastructure, as well. There's a number of things I think you can be doing from the outside or the inside out that have a pretty, when you multiply them over time, they have a pretty profound effect. So, I think that's an area too, as we review this again, if there's connections that can be made to other chapters, or if we just hit it right on the nose within this one.
Thank you. I also wanted to add, you've got the sewer lines showing, but where do we have treatment centers? I know Dominion just sent an email out yesterday saying, and there's no map showing what who's providing what electric, and maybe Dominion does all of Bluffton, and it's not really a question. I don't actually know the answer to that. But what I do know is they mentioned that they're working on a new power station in the next 5 years, I think is what they said in the email. And so I think that's also a relevant part of this discussion as we're looking at the facilities that are available and how they're changing. And I think even just as the community's going through this, for their own edification of what's happening or expected to happen.
Yeah, that's a good word to apply to this. I think the edification. There's a lot of overlapping boundaries in a chapter like this, right? You brought up watersheds, which are given to us by God. There's the energy sector side. There's telecoms. And then, also including some of the services provided, whether it's fire, policing. There's a lot of boundaries, I think, in a discussion like this. One of the items I thought might be actually helpful in this chapter, as I'm reading through it again, as kind of fresh eyes, is, a table that just identifies, what the town does and and the services the town has provided. And I think that actually would go a long way in helping, tell some of the story.
Yeah.
Agree.
Oh, and then one other
Sorry, go
thing.
ahead.
I think there's a water tower that's going in by that 5B, and I'd like to see that on the water.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, the new water main and water tower was on my notes too.
Oh, look at that. Okay, now I'm done.
Great minds, right?
On the education component, I think we've heard both in the plan from kind of some of the stakeholder meetings and then also from public comment that there's a lot of concern that we don't have the infrastructure presently to continue development at the pace that we are. So I think some part of this needs to focus on education for the public on how that's determined and put those numbers in context as they're getting reviewed. I don't know if that can be part of our UDO revisions to be having a more public-facing dialogue with each project as that's getting reviewed and approved. I think there's just a lot of unknown about that in general, for myself included. So what can we do to educate everybody and then make sure that we're making the best decisions that we can based on what we currently have capacity for, and what does that mean in context moving forward?
Commissioner DeBall, can I ask a quick follow-up on that question? Because I think that's a really interesting point you're making. So if I can repeat that back, it's some education within the document here that talks about the process by which development is evaluated for its impact specifically to do with the school district, and some assessment of, within that process, are there areas where we could bolster or improve? Is that part of what you're saying? I'm sorry.
Thinking more through like utilities in terms of electricity and sewer and all of those things. Just a lot of people think that we're exceeding capacity soon, or if we haven't already. So, and I know that is reviewed every time that there's new developments, but I think it would help for everyone to kind of know what the baseline is presently, what are the recommended, capacities from whatever standards those come from, and kind of how are we tracking that. And I understand that that's not necessarily, we are, as the town, are relying on the power providers to give us that analysis, but I think it would help if all of our boards, including myself, could be educated on how that's determined, and if we can also be sharing that with the public throughout the review process, to kind of ensure that we're taking it seriously, that we understand where it's coming from, and that we understand where we're at in terms of capacity and what's being planned to increase that capacity and keep up with what we're doing.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I think that word capacity could be applied to every one of these points of analysis or topics, right? I think as we think about some of the topics, I want to work to find the data to support each of those statements.
I don't know that the data needs to be in the plan, but I think maybe one of our objectives could be to gather that data and create some outreach, whether it's in writing at town halls or whatever, to kind of make sure that we're addressing that moving forward.
Yeah.
And as you alluded to, I mean, a lot of these organizations, businesses have a master plan, they have an analysis. And so if you can just make the reference to that. I know the schools are, nearly at 90% capacity, and generally speaking, in about 2 years, we're going to be well over our capacity, the way that master plan's written. And I think that, and they're right now trying to acquire land. That's one benchmark of one type of thing. But I think they all have these general overarching themes that could be giving us benchmarks as we're looking through plans that we're reviewing. How does this fit in with the model of what's happening over here with power or with sewer, schools? Yeah.
No doubt. Any other comments, thoughts?
I've got my list ready, so.
Go.
DL, Rich, you have any?
No, go ahead. Okay, you know me, I'm a list person. Some of the stuff I didn't see in here, I see the reference in B to
Okay.
fire and so on and so forth. I don't see a reference to our police department. Okay, which should be an A in the expansion of inventory. If we're talking about a community facility, a fire department being one, then a police department should be one. I don't see, and I'm just.
Commissioner, I don't mean to, I don't mean to interrupt, I apologize, but item A, expand inventory analysis, town-owned services, we do include policing in that second, so I apologize to
Then I
interrupt.
missed it, I apologize. Couple of things, and I heard mention of it, and there is somewhat of a mention, but include county parks and county recreation as well as the local
Yeah.
town. Don't see the oyster factory anywhere. I know you're going to have Oyster Factory Park, but the Oyster Factory is one of our community resources too. The last remaining oyster shucking operation in South Carolina. I know I'm bouncing around a little bit. The May River itself, while we could talk about it in natural resources, the May River is also a community facility. Go out there on any Saturday or Sunday to the sandbar, and you'll see it's a community facility being used just like any park. The Village at New Riverside out at the traffic circle at 46 and 170. Across the street is the new town park with the barn and fire department and so on there. That's a facility, when you expand, I know we'd all love to see in there. And the only other thing, it's a real nice write-up about the library, and it has 2 front porches, and it's good for the community. Something you may or may not know, there has been a site identified for a second library in Bluffton, and that's actually out at the Village at New Riverside, so that'd be nice to see. Seeing as this is a 10-year guiding document, kind of point us towards that second library too. So those.
The need for it.
Yep. Yep. And those are just some of the things I noticed.
That's very helpful, thank you.
One more thing to bring up on schools, which I'm sure we'll have more conversations about, but I had a chance to scan through the facilities master plan last night, and the plan talks about having, that we'll reach 100% capacity for high school, and that we are going to need not just new schools where we have the land, but they actually need another parcel. So is there anything that the town is able to do in terms of keeping that top of mind, similar to how I think in the economic section we talk about, having an inventory of places for future business? Is there a way for the town to have an inventory of places that could work for the school, or somehow coordinate with the school district to help facilitate acquiring whatever the next parcel is that they need?
Ooh, I gotta
Sure.
jump in there. That's a great idea.
Talking about working with the school district to help identify parcels and help them acquire them as they need. We don't want to step on top of them, but.
Yes, ma'am. You can come on up.
Whenever you want me to jump in, because you know I'm on.
Raise your hand or yell at me.
Okay.
Name and
I will
address.
say some of that has sort of already happened. Kevin has sort of reached out to us when he becomes aware of something. They don't always pan out, but we have appreciated that partnership we do have with county planning staff. And some of those things, obviously, for obvious reasons, we want to keep, quiet, so no one knows sort of what we're looking
Just a
at.
question.
Not to drive up the price.
Is that a specific activity that happens to, Kevin talks to you about something? Is there a process, or is it just You know, Kevin.
Relationship building as far as, there's no formal process in place. It's just building a relationship with staff over the years.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I think, that may be some kind of wording you might want to incorporate of, you talk about working with people, but it is really building those relationships with people.
Yeah.
I like that phrasing.
So I'm just going to point out what I was going to point out. So on page 160, I want to just make sure that you all are using data that is current to provide an accurate picture of what's happening with our enrollments and the capacity of our schools. So you all have several of you have talked about the facilities master plan. It is the most current document. I brought it. It's January 2022 because it looked like numbers that were used on that page are not quite correct, and they are from 2020. And if you remember, 2020 was COVID year. And COVID year for the school district, we saw a significant drop in enrollment. So we knew that any projections that were done based off that year were just going to be a skewed projection. And you'll see that in our facilities master plan, we've got more information that kind of, we're aware of this. And, on page 134 in that plan, you'll find a graph that shows 3 years of projections, that capacity and needed capacity. So we're at capacity, and here's what we need to really do the programs and the educational pieces that we want in our schools. And we talk about that in planning in terms of 85% of total capacity. We don't want to fill up every classroom. We want teachers to be able to be flexible in their spaces. And we have that luxury in other parts of the county. Here where we're growing fast, we don't have that luxury. So that's the line that you need to pay attention to, is that needed capacity. And that's where we talked about, we've crossed over that needed capacity line already in Bluffton. So I did want to point that out as far as if there's ways to incorporate that in your plan. I don't know. Maybe it's just making reference to the fact that we have this document, and it's something that, we all need to work together and keep in mind. Because we talk about what our priorities are in terms of student capacity projects. Starting on page 153 of this document, we talk about mobiles. That's our short-term plan. Certainly not a long-term plan for students to be in mobiles. We talk about early learning classrooms, pre-K education. If we were to expand pre-K to serve all the students, we would need to double the number of classrooms we have now. We can't do that in the Bluffton area. We talk about the need for a new elementary school. We have land for that on the May River High campus. We have also land for a new middle school at the May River High campus. We talk about a need for a new high school. We do not have land for a new high school. And we were talking about a comprehensive high school, you're looking at 100 acres. So when we talk about identifying potential parcels, we would love to always be in on those conversations with that. And again, land's just, it's my top priority sometimes. Now, also, no, we don't.
Carol, I'm sorry to
we don't have
interrupt.
money to build any of these facilities that we're talking about as well. So, yeah,
Can I ask a really quick question, Carol? I'm
Yep.
sorry to interrupt.
you can.
In terms of land, you talk about the 100 acres with the high school. Is there a cardinal direction that you see within the town where you would ideally place that investment? South,
I will have
east,
that
west?
conversation with you offline.
Yeah, because Carol,
Sorry.
I think back to River Ridge, and when the school district had to cobble together that property, and we're talking to a half a dozen or so different property owners, and you
Correct.
couldn't let them know you were trying to put a school there,
Correct.
or the property value would, or the
Yeah,
price
I
would
think
go
that
up.
was probably more Bluffton Middle. That one was really a whole lot
Yeah,
of,
that's true.
of parcels, yes. Yeah, but correct.
That's why, Kyle.
Yes. Kyle, I will have that conversation with you. You can reach
I
out to
get it.
Charlotte.
I
She's
get it.
got my info, and we can do
I
that.
get it.
But again, if
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
ways to think about that, of, how we can work together, that's great. I just want to make sure, yeah. Oh, I kind of touched about last night on other projects that touch on, the school district as a whole, and those are in here in terms of facility modernization projects. Again, most of our schools in Bluffton are newer, so that they don't really fall into that category. And then the last thing I was thinking about on your map in that section is that you excluded Okatee Elementary School, and while technically it's not in the town of Bluffton, students
Yeah.
who attend that school are within the town of Bluffton.
Yeah.
So, it's the one outlier. I wouldn't exclude it. I would put it in there because your residents are impacted by that. So I think that's all I had to say.
A question, just my education. The 100 acres for the new high school, is that within the 10-year time frame? Do you think that it is?
Yes.
And
It will be in a part of our planning as we look forward to future. We've already identified that need, so, we're going to be pursuing that.
And how does the land get identified? Is that something your group does, or?
Right now, we actually have a land consultant, educational land consultant, working on identifying property.
So that's not something that the town of Bluffton could be working with you on for this action
That is why we
plan?
have those offline conversations with town planning staff to talk about potential things. But, I think in terms of your plan and educating the public, what you've talked about these are needs. And certainly if you all put it in your plan, then that guides staff as well, towards things we need to continue doing. Again, for us, it's been relationship building, but people come and go, so it could change. If it's in your document, then it's there for, hey, this is a priority for us.
That's the only reason I was asking.
Yeah.
The relationships are important, and it works well.
Yes.
But, if you leave or
people leave.
Kevin leaves or
Right.
something, then how do we make sure that we still have the right people working on identifying where that 100 acres is going to be? Thank you.
Carol's not going anywhere.
Who knows?
I just want to say I read that, looked through that school master plan, or facilities master plan last night. One of the most helpful things in there to me, and I'm just letting you know so that in case future plans come out, you can just say, hey, they really like this over at the town, where I do.
Okay.
The map where you show where each of the schools are and where the people are located that are going to that school. It was so
It's
helpful.
eye-opening, isn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was very eye-opening. So thank you for, I know that's not necessarily, you didn't make that map, but
Oh, I did make that.
did you
map.
make that map?
I pretty
Fist
much
bump.
make that whole book, yes.
Thank you. It's such a gem to have in there.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. It's nice to have positive feedback, and that somebody read it. I know last year's
pictures.
book, we did provide the town a copy. I'll be happy to, you can get it obviously available online. But our board has recommended that, each of the municipalities and all those things get a copy, so someone at the town has it. I don't know who
When
has
does
it,
that
so.
generally come out?
January.
Okay.
Yeah, because we base all the information off our 45-day data, which usually falls late October. And by the time you process all that information and run your projections and create all the maps and do all that stuff, it's January before we can put it
Yeah.
out.
I'm just wondering if it wouldn't make sense to sprinkle in throughout the year, like conversations, like a 5-minute update from like the school district running through there's master plan updates that they have when
We
those.
would be happy to come talk with the planning commission about that at any point in time, yes. And about anything else you want to
Yeah.
ask us about, yeah.
Because,
Just
there's just like, even when you look at the transportation, the schools, the power company, what they're doing, like when I keep finding things, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. So this has been very illuminating of a process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're open. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. I wouldn't want to speak for your schedule, Carol, either, but I think as we discuss some of these other chapters, it seems like there's such a healthy overlap between what you all are doing and some of this, some of these other topics as well. So I'd hope you'd be well invited to the other meetings.
Any other comments on that area? All right, go ahead, Kyle, continue on.
sure if he heard.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I was saying you can go ahead and continue. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
I'm sorry, I was having a little trouble. What was that?
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay. I was saying you could go ahead. No, there weren't any further comments right now.
I just had one final rundown. I think within this chapter, as you can tell through my assessment of your comments, we have our work cut out here, and that's good. I think we know exactly what we need to do and to add the coverage that is appropriate. But some final notes from this section in particular, and you'll hear me say this as related to the transportation section as well. When we talk about subjective, this is an area where I want to work with Charlotte, with Kevin, I think with staff, where we start to determine, how does the town want to describe action, where we have partnerships that are necessary. Carol brings up a number of key points here. We think about the 100 acres, that we need to find, right, or for that particular investment. What do we want to say about that with the plan? I think where I'm looking for some direction from staff is the right verb, to attach to that, right? Whether it's facilitate, maybe not gift, but you know what I mean? Like we have to find the right way to describe how we're going to assist some of our service providers in doing their mission and doing it well and expanding it here in the town. Some simple pieces, again, simple not meaning small, simple just meaning I think I've got the right direction. There's certainly a need within this, as I review it, to expand on our description of what stormwater is, what it means, and our infrastructure in the town. And I think along with that, maybe not in prescribing some of these things, but in talking through some of the cutting edge approaches to managing that, whether it's about impervious surfaces. Ms. Mang, I think you made a point about this maybe on our meeting on the 13th, but whether it's about impervious surfaces, whether it has to do with green infrastructure, I think there's just a better story we can tell, more robust story about stormwater, its relationship to some of your jewels. I mean, May River being certainly, one of those, as you rightly point out, Commissioner, a piece of a community facility. And lastly, one thing I wanted to certainly include within this chapter, I talked about the table that introduces what you do, what you don't do, but also I think what would be important here is to include pardon the pun, but a pipeline assessment of capital projects, meaning things that are underway. You've got such a great website. Your capital improvements department does such a great job of, telling the story of what you're doing. I think that's just within the town and within what you've budgeted. There's a broader, I think, story around capital improvements, especially as due to infrastructure, that I think we could tell within this section, really just to show, what's out there on the horizon, 2 years, 5 years, some that may be visionary. I think we have to be careful about how we describe what we would call visionary work, meaning a project that has not met its dollar yet. But all of those things I think would help to augment this section and tell a much richer story that leads to a set of actions that we'll work with staff to continue to tailor.
Any further comments? Go ahead, Kathleen.
Kyle, the final document, will you be hyperlinking to some of the outside documents or to the outside documents that are listed within this?
Absolutely, especially with how plans are read these days, through a PDF form. We like to make them super interactive, meaning that if we're referencing, for instance, Carol's master plan, I think with her permission, we would link directly to that within the copy. Same deal within the plan itself. I think having, if there's ability to jump between sections, if there's a related item. I've done that in several plans recently, and people really like, having that option.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that I hadn't planned on. These interactive links, is this something that the town can then come back and update over time so that it doesn't always reference the 2021 Beaufort County Master Plan?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If it's part of this document, I don't know that it can be updated without going through the whole process. Does that make sense?
You can't just update a hyperlink?
No, because it's a different
If the
document.
document is published as the 10-year comp plan, I don't think you can update the links that are references there. That's what the 5-year update is for.
Could you do an appendix? Could you do an appendix that would just have the latest plans?
Maybe. I'm just raising that because I know that once we pass the,
Yeah,
once
makes
we
sense, yeah.
refer it and council passes it, I don't think it can change.
Because the hyperlink doesn't have to be the web address itself, it's where it references to that changes. So the wording wouldn't be changing, it's just where it's directing to you to, it's actually changing. Because like it could say Beaufort County School Facility Plan, and that's all it says. And you click on it, and it takes you to whatever the current one is, so that the hyperlink it's not www dot blah 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 2021. And so if the words don't change, then the document's not really changing.
Well, but however, the document was
based on
created
that.
based on what the current plan was at the time. That's where the thing, but that's for staff to figure out.
Okay.
Not to dump it on you.
Right.
Charlotte could do it. I've seen some communities on this particular note, have a website dedicated to the comp plan that also includes a series of links to related community plans or projects. So basically, associates those two things on a web page. And obviously that could be dynamic. That's not the adopted, document. That's part of your communication.
And then one of the other questions I had was, the Bluffton Explorer obviously has a significant amount of GIS data that relates to all this inventory, where the sewer is, where the, any of the other number of litany of things, sidewalks, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I assume we'll also we'll interface and direct them to the Bluffton Explorer in here, as well as it pertains throughout the document, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that's actually a great idea because you got that data set. And one of the benefits of it is you're able to query it on your own. So I think that's a great a note, not just for this section, but you mentioned also for land use, for housing, for a number of these where that data has been used, obviously to build a conclusion. So if you want a real world, live version of that, I think it's a good point. Can do that. We'll do that.
Great. I had one other thing, and I think of this as a relatively big thing. The natural resource section of this comp plan, and I realize I'm now referring to another thing that we're not covering here tonight, but the reason I do that is because it's so much of that natural resources section is parks. And natural resources, and parks aren't natural resources, parks are community facilities. And so I'm just wanting to understand what your perspective is on that, or are you thinking about moving that? Because I know we've talked about putting that in here, and I'm curious as to where you're going to go with that and how you're going to address that.
Yeah, that's a great note, Commissioner. And I saw your comment in there related to that. I think that might be a subjective item I want to talk to with staff. I think you're right. In looking around South Carolina, a lot of the communities are couching that assessment because it's a department piece in the facilities section. I think what we saw is just such the overlap between, access to your green amenities and your park system, but we'll work on the right solution there. And if we say something twice, maybe it's just more about the inventory and the assessment of the resource, assessment of the facilities. That section is more about how they provide access into your green or blueway network. We'll weigh that and come up with the right solution.
Okay, is there any other anyone from the audience? Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up, Kyle. You wrapped up?
You all done, Kyle?
You done?
I've got 30 more minutes I want to fill here. I'm just kidding.
Well, let's
No,
hold on for a
appreciate
second while
y'all
we
again.
adjourn, and then you can keep going. No.
No, I appreciate y'all. This two interesting topics here tonight. Lots of work on our team that we plan to be doing here, but that we take a little bit of a break. But we're getting right to work on these chapters as we have these conversations. So I'm hoping that in a rolling way, along with staff, we can be producing our 4.0 versions of each of these, and then moving and having the conversations in tandem. So thank you all again for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion, Charlie? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.